There's a different kind of silence falling over America's heartland. It's not the quiet satisfaction of a harvest brought in. It's the heavy, anxious silence of uncertainty. The silence of fields lying fallow, fields that might not get planted next season because the economics simply don't make sense. The silence echoing through port terminals where ships bound for Asia once loaded around the clock, now standing eerily idle. It's the gut-wrenching silence punctuated only by the auctioneer's call in yards where family farms, legacies built over generations, are dismantled and sold off, piece by painful piece. For decades, the American soybean farmer wasn't just a player. They were the undisputed king of the global market. China wasn't just a customer, it was their kingdom, the single biggest, most reliable buyer on the planet. Year after year, nearly half of all U.S. soybean exports embarked on the long journey across the Pacific, a trade relationship worth over $12 billion in 2024 alone. That money wasn't abstract wealth. It built communities. It funded local schools, bought new fire trucks, kept the lights on in small businesses. It was the bedrock of countless towns across the Midwest, tangible prosperity, grown from American soil. And then, with bewildering speed, it vanished. The U.S. government, driven by a stated aim to protect American manufacturing, launched an aggressive trade war. Sweeping tariffs were imposed: steel, aluminum, and the headline grabber, a massive, unprecedented 100% duty on Chinese electric vehicles. The stated goal: bring jobs back home, shield American factories from unfair competition. But international trade is rarely a one-way street. It's a complex ecosystem of action and reaction. And the response from Beijing was swift, strategically calculated, and devastating to a sector far removed from the automotive battleground. China didn't just passively accept the tariffs, it pivoted, it reevaluated its dependencies, and it turned away from American soybeans. Completely, decisively. As the crucial 2025 export season dawned, the usual flurry of orders simply never materialized. The phones in farmer co-ops stayed silent. American farmers harvested their crops, only to find their primary market had evaporated. Not a single bushel ordered by China. Zero. A market worth billions gone. According to meticulous tracking by the Financial Times, corroborated by sobering data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, China systematically and with remarkable speed replaced American supply. This wasn't a temporary blip. It was a fundamental restructuring of global trade flows. Brazil, already a major soybean producer, eagerly stepped into the enormous vacuum America had left. Brazilian farmers ramped up production, signed lucrative long-term contracts with Chinese buyers. New port infrastructure buzzed with activity. They effectively seized nearly three-quarters of the colossal Chinese soybean market, a market America had spent decades cultivating. The result for American farmers? Not just a bad year, a catastrophe. A confirmed $5.7 billion hole blown directly, annually into their revenue streams, according to stark analysis by the Nonpartisan Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. $5.7 billion vanished from the rural economy. Farm bankruptcies, particularly in heavily soy-dependent states like Iowa, began spiking, reaching alarming levels reminiscent of the devastating farm crisis of the 1980s. Layoffs rippled through small towns in Illinois and Nebraska. Tractor dealerships, fertilizer suppliers, local diners. The very heartland the trade war was ostensibly meant to protect was bleeding out, choked by the unintended consequences. And while American farmers desperately watched their golden harvests lose value in storage, their closest neighbor, their partner in the USMCA agreement, Canada, received a shocking offer from Beijing, an offer that looked suspiciously like the spoils carved out from America's own strategic miscalculation. Canada's golden opportunity, America's loss. While American ports fell silent, their Canadian counterparts faced a related problem. They too were suffering under Chinese retaliatory tariffs, punishment for Ottawa following Washington's lead. Then a confidential message traveled from Beijing to Ottawa, an offer so targeted, Canadian officials internally dubbed it the Golden Deal. The terms were stunningly direct, a clean quid pro quo. China would lift all its punishing retaliatory tariffs on Canadian agriculture. The crippling 70.8% on canola seed, the penalties on pork and seafood, unlocking market access potentially worth $5 billion. If Canada simply took one reciprocal step, remove its own 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. Remember the context. This was a tariff Canada had imposed just months earlier, not out of pressing domestic economic necessity, but largely as a gesture of solidarity with Washington's aggressive stance. Pause and absorb the brutal irony. American farmers are losing billions, directly because of retaliatory tariffs triggered by U.S. actions. Canadian farmers initially caught in the crossfire because they followed the U.S. lead, are now being offered an exclusive escape hatch, a potential boom by the very country the U.S. identifies as its primary economic adversary. Beijing's strategy isn't subtle, it's a masterclass in economic statecraft. They aren't just replacing American soybeans, they're executing a calculated long-term plan to fundamentally diversify their critical food supply chain, reducing dependence on any single nation, especially the United States. They desire stable, reliable sources, insulated from the unpredictable swings of American politics. And Canada, with its vast fertile lands and reputation as a predictable, rules-based trading partner, suddenly looks like a very attractive, very strategic alternative. China's interest in Canadian canola isn't just about cooking oil. Canola meal is a high-quality plant protein. It's a viable alternative to American soy in animal feed rations across Asia. Securing reliable access fits perfectly into China's paramount long-term national goal of food security. And Beijing is signaling it's willing to pay a strategic price for that reliability by removing the very tariffs strangling Western Canada. So, the split screen playing out across North America is stark. While American farmers face foreclosure sales and mounting debt, Canadian farmers see a potential resurrection, a chance to reclaim a massive market. While the U.S. Department of Agriculture releases grim reports on export losses, economists in Canada are running models projecting billions pouring back into their western provinces if China's duties are lifted. This isn't just a peripheral trade deal. It's a direct consequence, a painful strategic blowback, resulting directly from America's own protectionist policies. The U.S. attempted to build an impenetrable tariff wall around its auto industry, but in doing so, it neglected the interconnectedness of global trade, leaving its agricultural flank completely exposed. And now China is deftly exploiting that vulnerability, using the economic desperation of Canadian farmers as a powerful lever against both Ottawa and Washington. The price of protectionism, unintended consequences. The narrative sold to the American public was simple. Tariffs protect American jobs. Tariffs punish unfair competition. Tariffs make America's industrial base robust again. But the complex reality playing out in 2025 reveals a far more nuanced picture, one where the supposed cure carries significant, damaging side effects. Let's dissect the failure points of this broad-stroke protectionist strategy. The flagship policy, the 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, was presented as the ultimate shield for Detroit. But did it truly achieve that primary goal, or did it merely mask deeper challenges facing American automakers, like global competition and the staggering cost of the EV transition? Evidence suggests tariffs haven't magically revitalized American manufacturing across the board. Instead, these broad tariffs triggered a predictable cascade of negative consequences. First, and most obviously demonstrated, retaliation. As vividly illustrated by the soybean catastrophe, major economies like China don't just passively absorb punitive tariffs. They hit back, and they don't hit randomly. They target politically sensitive American export sectors where the pain will be maximized, the agricultural heartland. A direct, quantifiable hit of $5.7 billion annually just from soybeans. Second, rising costs for American consumers and businesses. A fundamental economic truth: tariffs aren't paid by foreign governments. They are taxes levied at the border, paid by American companies. Those costs are almost invariably passed down the supply chain, manifesting as higher prices for American families and businesses. This tariff-induced inflation acts as a drag on the overall economy. Third, damaged alliances and eroded geopolitical leverage. The intense pressure on close allies, like Canada, to fall in line with U.S. trade policy, even when it harms their own national interests, creates deep resentment and erodes trust. Canada imposed the 100% EV tariff primarily out of loyalty, not domestic necessity. The direct result? Their own farmers were economically devastated by Chinese retaliation, igniting a severe political crisis within Canada, pitting region against region. And now China, observing this U.S.-induced strife, expertly uses that crisis to offer Canada a separate peace, a tempting off-ramp, an action that could weaken the cohesion of the entire North American trade bloc. This is the core insight. U.S. protectionism, as implemented here, isn't just failing to achieve some goals. It's actively, demonstrably counterproductive. It's inflicting deep, measurable wounds on American farmers. It's straining vital relationships with key democratic allies. And counterintuitively, it's creating unforeseen strategic openings for America's primary competitor, China, to exploit divisions and expand its own economic influence. The Golden Deal offered to Canada serves as Exhibit A. It starkly demonstrates that China is playing a long, strategic game of economic chess. While the U.S. focused tactically on building tariff walls, China focused strategically on building resilient, alternative global supply chains and leveraging the economic pain points created by those very walls. The shock rippling through Washington shouldn't just be that Canada might take this deal. The deeper shock should be the recognition that America's own policies unintentionally created the very conditions, the economic desperation in Canada, the market vacuum left by U.S. agriculture, that make China's offer so tempting, so logical, and ultimately so damaging to U.S. interests. The Heartland's lament, the human cost. For policymakers in Washington, D.C., trade statistics are often abstract numbers. Billions gained, billions lost. But travel 1,000 miles west, walk the dusty section roads of Iowa, pull up a chair in a small-town diner in Illinois, and this isn't abstract at all. It's deeply personal. It's existential. It's the certified letter arriving from the bank. It's cold, formal language, barely masking the threat of foreclosure on loans they can no longer service. It's the heartbreaking sight of the for sale sign hammered into the rich black soil. Land their family might have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into for generations, now being sold off. It's the impossible, gut-wrenching conversation around the kitchen table with their kids, trying to explain why the college fund isn't what they'd planned for. The sudden collapse of the Chinese soybean market isn't just an economic event. It's a rolling social crisis quietly unfolding across rural America. Farm debt is soaring. Farmers are caught in a brutal squeeze. The cost of fertilizer, fuel, and seed remains high. While the price for their main cash crop has plummeted, the margins have simply evaporated. Mental health issues in farming communities are reportedly worsening. Rural crisis hotlines see increased call volumes. The sense of isolation and despair is palpable, echoing the dark days of the 1980s farm crisis. Young people, the next generation needed to sustain these communities, look at the crushing debt and profound uncertainty, and make the rational choice. They're leaving for the cities. And underneath the stoicism, there's a growing, simmering bitterness, a profound sense of being promised protection, but ultimately being delivered pain and abandonment. They feel like pawns in a high-stakes game played by others. They hear the news about Canada potentially getting its massive canola market back, thanks to a deal with China, while their own government seems unable to find a similar off-ramp to reopen the door. China slams shut on their economic future. They watch with deep frustration as Brazil, once a competitor, now aggressively feasts on the market share America abandoned, locking in long-term contracts that will be difficult to break. It feels to many lifelong farmers like a fundamental betrayal, a sacrifice demanded, made, and then seemingly forgotten. The stark reality is that the trade war, initiated to project American strength, has inflicted deep, lasting wounds on its own agricultural base, a sector vital for exports, national identity, and food security. It has brutally demonstrated the limits of using tariffs as a blunt instrument in a complex global economy. You cannot simply wall off one major sector, like automotive, without expecting intricate, painful consequences to cascade through other sectors, like agriculture. The global economy is a web, not isolated boxes, and crucially, you cannot launch a major economic conflict without rigorously planning for how your adversary and your allies might react in ways that could undermine your own long-term goals. China's Golden Deal is a precisely crafted geopolitical message sent to Washington, written in the unambiguous language of economic consequence. Your tariff walls have exploitable holes. Your frustrated allies have options. And ultimately, it is your own people in the heartland who are paying the steepest price. Module 5. America at a Crossroads, Conclusion and Resonance. The situation unfolding in late 2025 is deeply uncomfortable and strategically challenging for the United States. Its primary rival, China, is successfully turning America's own tariff strategy against it. Its closest ally, Canada, is tempted to break ranks due to pain inflicted indirectly by U.S. policy. And its own farmers are facing a profound crisis, feeling abandoned and unheard. This forces a fundamental, painful question upon American policymakers and the public alike. Is the current path of broad, aggressive protectionism actually working in America's long-term national interest? If these tariffs predictably lead to retaliation that devastates other vital export sectors, if they push democratic allies towards accommodating strategic rivals, if they fail to deliver the promised manufacturing renaissance while imposing tangible costs on consumers, then what is the real, holistic price of this strategy? Is the perceived benefit in one area worth the demonstrable damage in others? The Golden Deal between China and Canada may or may not be consummated, but the significant damage to the American farmer is already done. The $5.7 billion annual loss is a stark reality. The farm bankruptcies are happening now. The shift in global trade patterns favoring Brazil is becoming entrenched. The strategic opening for China, allowing it to exploit divisions within the Western alliance, has already been created. The strains on the crucial North American alliance are visible. The fallout from this trade war is far from over. It raises urgent, systemic questions about America's fundamental place in the shifting global order. Are blunt, confrontational instruments like tariffs the right tools for 21st century challenges? These are not easy questions. They demand honest, clear-eyed examination. The fallout from these policies raises urgent questions about America's path forward. Are we witnessing a slow erosion of U.S. influence, accelerated by its own policies? Click the video on your screen for our deeper analysis on whether America is truly prepared for the complexities of the new multipolar world. We leave you with this critical thought, a question resonating not just in Ottawa, but across Washington and the American heartland. When the policies designed to protect one part of your nation's economy end up devastating another, and simultaneously create unexpected strategic opportunities for your chief global rivals. How do you truly, honestly measure success or failure? And perhaps the most crucial human question of all, what does America owe its own farmers, its own workers, caught in the painful economic crossfire of its global strategy?